All right, let's move over to this next matchup, which is in the women's strawweight division, as we have Tatiana Suarez coming in at minus 155, going up against Lupita Godinez, who comes in at plus 135. Now, starting off on the Suarez side of things, she is coming off of a pretty solid win over Amanda Lemos last time. She utilized her wrestling through the first 2 rounds, as we would obviously expect her to do. She was able to land 3 takedowns and accrue about 9.5 minutes of control time. She started to fall off a little bit in that 3rd round, but luckily Lemos was unable to land anything of significance to steal that round completely back. But Suarez still trying to build herself back up to get to another title shot, just as she did against Weili Zhang. Now, I still feel a little bit bad that I didn't give Zhang the credit that she deserved going into that matchup. I really thought Suarez's wrestling was going to be too much for Zhang to deal with. You know, we saw Shevchenko outgrind Zhang pretty easily in their matchup, but I think the advantage that Shevchenko had over Zhang that Suarez didn't was that she could be competitive enough in the striking game and showcase enough strength that she could get Zhang down and really hold her on her back. Suarez had good success in that first round, but she was unable to replicate it after that. She clearly needs to work on her striking game still, but her wrestling is enough to separate her from the top, I think she belongs in the top 3 of the strawweight division, and I think that's enough to separate her from the rest of the strawweight division there. Again, her striking leaves a lot of holes, but she does a great job in terms of finding her takedown entries, getting into the clinch, and then just chaining takedown attempts together, and then asserting her top dominance, where she often is able to cruise to decisions or find submission opportunities like she did against Montana De La Rosa and Jessica Andrade. At 35 years old, time might be winding down for her, but again, considering how much of a wrestling edge she often has, I think she can still be successful, into her late 30s, even at the strawweight division. And considering, Zhang no longer the champion, I don't know what her future entails and if she's going to come back and challenge for the title, but, Vina Jandiroba, Mackenzie Dern, those are winnable fights for Suarez. So I could see her, if she's able to get a dominant win this weekend, potentially being inserted to be the next challenger for Mackenzie Dern. But first, she's got to get through Lupita Godinez. Now, Godinez came up short against Vina Jandiroba and Mackenzie Dern. Both fights where I thought her wrestling would allow her to stay away from danger. And in the Jandiroba fight, it didn't play out that way. She got control in the 1st and 3rd rounds. She did decent in the 2nd round by out-damaging Jandiroba, but it still wasn't enough to get the win. And then in the Mackenzie Dern fight, it seemed like she was just too gun-shy about the potential takedowns coming her way from Dern, that she just allowed Dern to get up on the numbers and eventually win that fight by decision as well. So those were very good learning lessons for Godinez as she tries to march forward and shake those losses off. She's come up big against Julia Palastri, where she out-wrestled her for 2 rounds and did enough to survive in the 3rd round. And then against Jessica Andrade, she wasn't all that successful with her wrestling. She only landed 1 of 14 takedown attempts, and that 1 takedown came in the 2nd round, where she accrued about 1.5 minutes of control time. But for the large part of those first 10 minutes, she utilized slicker striking to thwart the aggressive, reckless striking style of Andrade, and that was enough for her to win that fight on the scorecards. In the 3rd round, wasn't a good look though, right? She was getting marched down. She was having all of her takedowns shucked off. She was getting bloodied up. She was getting brutalized by Andrade. But luckily, she stayed on her bicycle enough, mixed in enough offense of her own to survive into the final bell and then win that fight the way that she did. I'd say the best trait of her is her wrestling. She does a good job with her wrestling and chain wrestling, but she needs to have a big enough advantage over her opponent to actually be able to get them to the ground and keep them there, like she did against Julia Palastri. Even against Andrade, we've seen Andrade struggle against heavy wrestlers in the past, notably Tatiana Suarez, but even she was struggling to get Andrade to the ground. As a striker, she's not bad. She's getting the technical things done, but she really needs to have good enough stylistic matchups to implement that type of striking, like she did against Ricci, like she did against Andrade's reckless striking style. I will say, I don't think she's as good as I originally gave her credit for when she first came into the UFC, and over her last 5 fights alone, you can kind of see what I mean by that, as she'll likely not get to the point where she fights for a title, and she'll often come up short against the top 5 of the division. And that's exactly what she's fighting this weekend in Tatiana Suarez. I think Suarez is the better wrestler. I think Godinez might have a slight striking edge, but I think that, 3-inch height and 5-inch reach disadvantage will keep Godinez from having prolonged success in the striking game. She's going to have to get into the pocket to let go with her hands, but I think that will leave many opportunities for Suarez to get a hold of her and then eventually start just wearing her down, getting to the clinch game, dragging her to the mat, and I think she'll have major success holding Godinez down. I really like Suarez in this spot. I know Godinez has that striking edge and she has enough of a wrestling background, but we've seen other grapplers have success against Godinez, and Suarez is still probably the best wrestler in this division. And I don't think Godinez's striking game is threatening enough to really keep Suarez away from what she wants to do. So I like Suarez here. It wouldn't surprise me if she's able to lock up a submission here either, but I think Suarez will grind her out. I think she'll make it look fairly dominant as well, and I think we see Suarez win this fight on the scorecards. Kind of surprised we're only getting minus 155 here. I know Godinez is good, but I think people are kind of forgetting how good Suarez actually is as well, and I think she'll remind people this weekend. So give me Suarez and Suarez by decision.